Welcome to Lunch with the Lord. I'm Pastor Mark. We're in Judges. We're going to be starting in chapter 19 this lesson. But before we begin, Jeremiah 15:16, thy words were found, and I did eat them, and thy word was unto me the joy and the rejoicing of my heart. Now, as we begin chapter 19, chapters 19 to 21 deal with from religious apostasy to moral depravity. In chapters 17 and 18, which we just finished, dealing with Micah and his idols, and Jonathan the Levite and the tribe of Dan going up and building a new city of Dan and establishing idol worship. That was the religious apostasy. Now we're going to see moral depravity, and it deals here in these 3 chapters. We're looking at the tribe of Benjamin. Now, as we saw in chapters 17 and 18, the downward fall of the children of Israel, and really for any nation, began with religious apostasy. The next stage after religious apostasy is moral depravity, which we're going to be seeing here in these last 3 chapters of Judges. These 3 chapters center around the tribe of Benjamin, and they tell of the great level of immorality that they had fallen to. Their immorality led to abusing and murdering a Levite's concubine, which then resulted in a civil war, which almost wiped out the whole tribe of Benjamin. The nation of Israel as a whole was corrupt and sinful and had fallen to great depths from what Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, and Joshua had given them as examples for how God's people were to live. And the reason is seen in the very last verse of the book of Judges. In Judges 21, verse 25, it says, in those days there was no king in Israel, which means that there was no godly representative. Every man did that which was right in his own eyes. So this is the reason why you're going to see so much sin and depravity in the children of Israel. They had no godly representative. No one that would stand up and say, you know what, you're doing wrong. We need to stop this. God is going to get angry, and he's going to bring punishment upon us. When the hearts of a nation turn away from those whom God has sent to be a representative of him, then their sinful, wicked hearts will begin to feel free to do whatever their wicked hearts desire. They remove God's restraints. And when our hearts are free to do whatever they want, they will always go straight towards sin. As I said last lesson, listen, when our hearts are free to do whatever they want, our hearts aren't just going to produce love and joy and peace and serenity and all these other wonderful things, kindness and gentleness. Oh no, our wicked, sinful heart is going to go straight towards sin. When evil and sin are not properly dealt with, they have a tendency to grow. This is why a nation that refuses to have stiff penalties for crime always has a high crime rate. And that's just the way it is. King Solomon said it perfectly in Ecclesiastes chapter 8 and verse 11. He says here, because sentence against an evil work is not executed speedily, therefore the heart of the sons of men is fully set in them to do evil. Because when a criminal can get off, excuse me, when a criminal can get off from committing a crime and punishment is delayed or punishment is very lax, it's just going to promote more and more sin, even worse sin, worse evil. If you think sin and crime is much more worse today than in Old Testament times, you're wrong. People were just as wicked then as they are today. Their sinful nature was no different than our sinful nature is today. It's just that we today have more advanced. We are more advanced in the way we do our sins. We got computers and we got cars and trains and all these other things. And we've got more sophisticated ways to commit sin. But as far as, is our society worse than it was thousands of years ago? No. Sinful nature is just as wicked now as it was then. Ecclesiastes chapter 1 and verse 9 says, there is no new thing under the sun. It's nothing different. There's nothing new under the sun. As we begin these last 3 chapters of Judges, don't think that the sins that you read about here are any different or less horrible than what you see on TV today. In fact, the sins that we see in these chapters are the reason why many people watch TV. They watch it for murder, they watch it for adultery, for gang rape, wife abuse, same-sex relationships. All of these sins are sugar-coated for our taste. It was the same back then. It's the same today. You see it on TV. You know what the problem is with what TV has brought? It's caused people's hearts to become numb towards sin. Oh, yeah. They become numb towards sin. It doesn't look so bad. It doesn't feel so bad. Let's read chapter 19 and verse 1. And it came to pass in those days, when there was no king in Israel, that there was a certain Levite. He was sojourning on the side of Mount Ephraim, who took to him a concubine out of Bethlehem, Judah. Now, it says here, there was no king here in Israel. Now, it seems to me that the writer is making a point for the reason why we read what is going to happen in these next 3 chapters. He's basically saying, get ready. What you're about to read in these next 3 chapters is because there's no king in the land. There was no one appointed by God to represent his ways and to enforce discipline to the children of Israel. And because of this, you will read what happens to a society that turns away from God. What you're going to read in these next couple chapters here is you're going to see this is the heart of people, of a society that turn their hearts away from God. It says here in verse 1, it says, a certain Levite. Now, in the book of Judges, only 2 Levites are mentioned in the whole book of Judges. Micah's Levite of chapter 17 and verse 7, which we just got done studying a number of lessons ago, and this one here, this Levite here. Now, there's no name given to this Levite. The very tribe, which is Levi, the very tribe that had the tremendous privilege to have God only as their portion and were to teach the rest of the tribes the law of Moses, and how God wanted them to be a holy nation. This tribe of Levi is represented by these two men. The Levites, which should have been the one tribe to stay true to God, had also now been infected with corruption, with sin, with selfishness, and independence from God. That the tribe of Levi was given the ultimate blessing of any tribe in Israel, of anybody on the earth, is they were called by God to have God as their portion in this life. And we're seeing they turn their hearts, the wicked hearts, against God. In James chapter 3 and verse 1, James warns his readers not to be anxious to be leaders or to be teachers or to be pastors of the gospel of Christ. Why? Because a greater responsibility is attached to being that. And with it comes a greater judgment. Oh yeah, the tribe of Levi, they were they should have been the last tribe to forsake God, but they did. And because they had the highest calling, yet they'll receive the greater punishment. So also the pastors and Bible study leaders in this world today, they will receive the greater punishment because they have the higher calling. And James tells them, don't be quick to want to be a pastor or a leader or a preacher of this gospel. Don't be quick to do that, because the greater the responsibility, the greater the judgment. This Levite is sojourning in the upper north land of Ephraim, maybe because the ark was still at Shiloh. But the fact that there is not recorded one religious deed towards God seems to imply that this Levite in Ephraim, because this Levite was not in Ephraim because of the ark. He was sojourning in Ephraim, and the ark was in Shiloh, which was in the territory of Ephraim. But it doesn't say he was in Ephraim because of the ark, because again, you can read these 3 chapters. Not once does it say that this Levite did anything religious toward God at all. Is it possible? Yes, but probably no. That he was sojourning in Ephraim by himself. Is it possible he was there because of the ark? Yes, but probably he wasn't there because of the ark. Again, we don't know. And he takes a concubine out of Bethlehem, Judah, the same city that Micah's Levite came from. Chapters 17 and 18. Michael's Levite, Jonathan, he came from Bethlehem, Judah. There must have been a settlement of Levites at Bethlehem, Judah. A concubine, now listen, this is important because it's going to deal with the next several verses in this chapter. A concubine was basically, she was an inferior wife. Both she and her children did not have the same rights as a proper wife. We see that in Genesis 25 verses 1 through 6, Exodus chapter 21 verses 7 through 9, and Deuteronomy 21 verses 10 through 14. So was a concubine somewhat of a wife? Yeah, she was, but she and her children did not have the same privileges and rights as a proper wife had. Abraham had Hagar as a concubine, and Jacob, he had 2 wives and 2 concubines. Also, Gideon and Saul and David and Solomon and Rehoboam, they also had concubines. All right, we're going to continue on in verse 2 next lesson. But until then, walk with the Lord. I know he walks with you.